government federal agent or a member of the Department of Justice and you didn't notice the treason, that's not going to wash because
ignorance of the
we work 24/7. Actually, weekends we don't even know it's a weekend. We just keep on working, and I guess that's what you've been doing because now you've come up with a really good reason to do something that I've really wanted to do for a long time, and that's I want to be Odysseus and poke out the eye of the Cyclops, and that one big eye is part of the five eyes, and the one big eye is Britain. I don't think that we should be allowing the British, who have demonstrated again and again to give us false information that have gotten us into war after war. Why would we ever share anything with them? And especially our intelligence, and especially if you see that they've already infiltrated all of our military industrial complex, all of our contractors, all of our corporate intelligence, and they already have their biggest piece of the pie, their lion's share. But what you've recently
Douglas, if anybody doubts what you just said, they need to look up Serco and realize that Serco has over 5,000 contracts with the U.S. government, most notably in space wars, in the Navy. They run the Obamacare website. They process all of our patents at the patent office. And by the way, their latest 10K securities report neglected to report that they run our patent office. And it goes on and on. They manage something like 62 of our air traffic control towers in the United States. They manage FEMA regions, and it just goes on and on. And this is a British company, so this is not generalization on your part.
Oh no, I generalize when you bring all this. Your research and research of Anonymous Patriots and research of staff writers alone in America's are mind-boggling. You work with them and you're their voice. And
so yes, they're a great group of people.
It's amazing that we have so much behind us, so when we come to speak sometimes I go a little bit fast, assuming everybody has read all of these things. But it's pretty much for sure, if we're saying it, then we can prove it. And we already have proven it. And I like that about you. When we do a show like this one here, there's already the research that has been done by the staff writers, from your researchers, you, which blah, blah, blah. And basically, you let me know what it is that your researchers found. So now you found more stuff and arming and five. Recently, Alexander Downer said, the man who tried to set up your top office, that he is a warrior for the Western Alliance. Okay, he's from Australia.
That so who elected him to be warrior for the Western Alliance, whatever that means?
Yeah, and he's not in the West. And he is now, he used to run Australia when he gave, $25 million to the Hillary Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Foundation for HIV drugs, and then didn't get any. He did that twice. People already seem to notice he did it once, but he's very corrupt. So when Hillary didn't get elected, they kicked him out. And so he became the High Commissioner to Britain. And so he was basically, has come out now and said, what he means by Western alliances, the Five Eyes, and that he is a warrior for them, and that absolutely he wasn't part of trying to frame George Papadopoulos. But that's a perfect example of what Five Eyes does. Yes, they certainly were part of the British spying on Trump. They were the instigators of it, and he was working directly with them while he was in London. And so what you have found out is that this is so endemic. This is so much part of the plan that the moment that high technology could be stolen through the patents, it looks like Five Eyes has been in control of, as he calls it, a warrior of the Western Alliance. So the Western Alliance, what we call the Anglo-American Alliance, has basically been hiding behind Five Eyes. And we in America, when they're spying on us, the Brits came over to spy on our president. That's okay? How is that okay? Can you explain the Five Eyes to us?
Five Eyes sounds like an interesting name, and you can envision a flag with five. I just saw one today, an illustration, five eyes with eyeballs, and the backgrounds were the national flags of the U.S., Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. That's the Five Eyes group. And just a couple of months before our trial with Facebook, the NSA released a secret document that had been signed on March 5th of 1946, which talked about an intelligence sharing agreement between the U.S. and the UK and the UK Commonwealth. Actually, it said Great Britain. And this document said that they were going to share all signals intelligence, and that is anything that comes through the phone, through telegram, telex, digital, and now the internet. They were going to share all information. And this was just on the heels of just World War II stopping. So we saw that, and we said, wow, this is amazing. And then the other thing about this agreement is the people who signed this agreement agreed that they would keep the existence of the agreement secret. And so we've known this now for several months. And just in the last 24 hours, some of our people have discovered the source documents that actually are the minutes of the meetings that occurred after this agreement was signed. I'm actually looking at that agreement here. I'm going to make sure I get that date right. It was March 5th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall?
That sounds right.
Yeah, March 5th, 1946. And then within days, intelligence people from the U.S. and Great Britain started having meetings at 33 Grosvenor Square in London, where they started mapping out how they were going to do this intelligence, how they were going to share this intelligence. And we have very detailed minutes of the meetings. And so we had people going through that. And the curious thing is, even though this is 1946, this is 2019, that's how many years later? That's almost 80 years later. They're still redacting names on these documents. I mean, that's shocking. I mean, most of these people are very old or not here anymore, and yet their names being blotted out. But the interesting thing, several strategic things about the redactions on these documents. Not a single American's name is redacted on any of these documents. But I'm going to estimate about 2/3 of the British names on these documents are still redacted to this day. So that's very telling. So what we think behind those names are probably royalty, probably the landed gentry. These are probably family names, and maybe even banking and corporate names of people who are now either themselves or their children are running major corporations. That's what we guess. Now, the more interesting thing came out just a couple hours ago. We started going through this set of documents, and these are the joint meetings between the U.S. and Great Britain, and there's a chairman identified on these documents. But as we noticed that in each case, each set of meeting minutes, the chairman's name was blanked out along with others. And what we've learned over time is that redactions are never perfect. And so we had some folks that were actually reading through every page, and we said, find the name of this chairman. And so to cut a long story short, we started going through, and every time you saw the chairman identified, the name was blanked out, except for one set of minutes where the format on the cover page of the meeting was a little different, and the person missed the name of the chairman. And so the chairman of these meetings was identified in this one set of minutes, and I had it open here. I just let me go back to it here. Oh yeah, there it is. The chairman of this meeting, of the minutes of the inaugural meeting of the U.S. British Signals Intelligence Technical Conference, was a man by the name of Major General Sir Stuart G. Menzies, Menzies. And so we looked up Stuart Menzies, Sir Stuart Menzies, and I think we discussed earlier, I'll just, rather than make you guess, I'll tell you who this person is. This person was the founder of the SIS, the SOE, and MI6. And he and another British knight by the name of Sir Edward Travis, who ran Bletchley House during World War II, were the prime organizers of these meetings. And it's clear from these minutes that the British were running the development of what we now know as the NSA and GCHQ, and that the head of MI6, the stay-behind unit, the SOEs, the people that were doing most of the espionage around the world, were organizing the development of how signals intelligence was going to be handled between the United States and Britain, and Britain's key Commonwealth partners, which ended up being New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and the U.S. So clearly they saw us as just the extension of the Commonwealth. And this is exactly consistent with what we've seen from this 200-year Cecil Rhodes plan for the development of a new world order based on Anglo-American superiority. So what we now can tell from these documents, and we're seeing this start to pop out now in this Trump-Russia investigation as the spotlight is starting to turn on the British as the organizer of the Trump-Russia hoax, is what we will see next, and I think you and I both talked about this, we're going to see them claim that they can't talk about who the British people are because it will reveal sources and methods of spying. And because of that, they're going to claim that they can't share who in Britain was involved in the Trump-Russia hoax. But here's my proposal. My proposal is this. None of those claims of sources and methods is valid, because what we see here now is that the British GCHQ is running our NSA, our CIA, and is running these stay-behind networks that have been around since World War I through World War II, have been passed down to the children of these people who organized this in World War II. And what we're seeing in the radical left that is attempting to take over these stay-behind the world and organize it around unelected World War I heads of these corporations have been passed down to children, the NSA and the GCHQ as their private spy. And what we're seeing in it has nothing to do with sovereign nations protecting their secrets. It has to do with them covering up these crimes that they have used our intelligence communities to perpetrate around the world against the citizens of various countries, including the United States and Britain.
Well, we know that's true because they use the GCHQ headquarters, the General Communication Headquarters leader of Britain's GCHQ, Robert Hannigan, to spy on Trump. We know that basically what we call our OSS, which was the beginnings of our CIA, and then of course that spread into the NSA. So basically all of the units of intelligence that really, they're not going to tell you anything about what they do. These are liars, cheaters, these are subverters, these are infiltrators, these are espionage, people who do nothing but lie. Nothing they ever say is true. And this all came from the Brits. Well, isn't it interesting that, just as you say, they're going to try to use their Five Eyes national security concerns to say that they're not going to let you know who the sources and who the methods are that were used for the spying on Trump. Well, I'll tell you who the sources were. They're British criminals. And I'll tell you the methods they used. It's called overthrowing a sitting U.S. president, a color revolution, a treasonous act by those inside of our domestic borders, and actions from war actors outside of our domestic borders. And I don't care that they're members of the Five Eyes. That just means they had more access to information that they used against us, and all the more reason that we should finally win the American Revolution and kick Britain out of our country. Now, you're going to think that, of course, I'm exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating at all, because we now know, because of Freedom of Information Act Judicial Watch papers, show that the Deputy Assistant to the U.S. State Department, Kathleen Kavalek, was planning with Bruce Ohr to take anything they could that was dirt and basically use it against Trump. But in that same communications, they acknowledge that Britain has been completely informed about all of this. And then recently in the Telegraph, a newspaper in Britain, they came out with 2 articles with their alibi. And basically, they clearly point out that the Brits knew about all of this and read the dossier and went over every single detail of the dossier with Christopher Steele long before Trump ever knew about it. And they're trying to say, that it was only in October. That's a lie. It goes all the way back to February 2016. But they point blank say in this article that the head of MI6, Alex Younger, and that the head of MI5, the current head at that time, Andrew Parker, were absolutely, completely briefed on this, and that we know Alison Saunders met with Bruce Ohr and Nellie Ohr, and we know that Arvinder Sambhai was the controller who was working directly with Mueller to cover up this conspiracy from the beginning. And we know that Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of MI6, was the handler of Stephen Halper, who was the handler of Christopher Steele. So when we're talking about British involvement, it doesn't get any higher. But in this article, it says that they never told Theresa May. Okay, impossible. You're telling me that every single member of their intelligence community was involved in this, ex-members and current members of the British government. They found that this was literally, if you read the dossier, it says that Trump has been a Russian spy confirmed for 5 years before he was
right. That was the opening statement, I think.
Yes, it's the opening statement. And so that they didn't bring this to anybody's attention.
Well, the other as interesting as Theresa May is Gina Haspel was the CIA chief in London at the time, and according to this agreement between the U.S. and America, or the U.S. and Britain, she would have had to have been informed about this intelligence. No question.
And we know that Arvinder Sambhai, who had helped Stephen Halper lure George Papadopoulos to London, who also then told George Papadopoulos to go to Rome and meet Michael Gaeta, who was a FBI/CIA counterintelligence operative, thinking that he was attached to the U.S. Embassy in Rome. We know those directions had to come directly from Gina Haspel, her permission. They had to come from John Brennan. They had to come from Comey, because these are people working directly for them. And we know that they were all working out of London. So there is no way that you can say Arvinder Sambhai, who had been working with Robert Mueller since 9/11 and before, and has been part of covering up all kinds of horrible things with Mueller, she was directly connected to framing George Papadopoulos with Joseph Mifsud, with Stephen Halper, with Alexander Downer, with Andrew Wood, with Dearlove, okay, so what we have here is exactly what you're saying. The Five Eyes do whatever they want, keep it completely secret. They might not even tell each other, but who knows? The point is they all have shared intelligence that they're using against the United States of America to overthrow a sitting president.
Well, here we have March 15th, 1946, item 15. Sir Edward Travis suggested that to meet such difficulties, an arrangement might be made by which British non-technical experts were made aware of the purpose and method of operation of a technique which was developed under U.S. patent in order to ensure that the technique was used to the maximum advantage without the necessity of releasing technical details to the UK. So here we have our government and the British government conspiring on how to abuse U.S. patents right there in writing. Boom. These people are disgusting.
And they do it because it means so much money, so much power, so much control. And as we've always said, this is directly linked to the military. These are all military actions using national security or protecting the Queen as their excuse for what they do. And there was a man, Sir Charles Farr, who's the head of the Joint Intelligence Committee, that is actually combines MI5 and MI6 and everything else in intelligence, General Communications Headquarters and everything else. And he directly states that he was 100% in support of Christopher Steele, went over each of the 17 different installments to this Christopher Steele PP dossier. This man, the head of British intelligence, admits that he was part of it from the beginning. And just as you say, they're going to just pass it off and say, oh, but we can't talk about it. It's Five Eyes. It's classified.
Sources and methods. These sources and methods are all the fruit of a poisonous tree, in my view. And here we go back to the origins of the NSA, the GCHQ, were MI6, were some of the worst liars on the planet, have been involved with the organization of all of our communications infrastructure throughout the world, our entire lifetime. Major General Sir Stuart G. Menzies and Sir Edward Travis, two men dedicated and took oaths to the Queen of England, not to the United States, not to the U.S. Constitution, but to the Queen of England. They drove the development of what, I mean, these two guys both worked in World War I with Alfred Milner, with Lord George, with the group that developed the Tavistock Institute methods for how to use psychological techniques in the wireless arena, in both TV, radio, and now the internet. These guys were the direct. This is the continuity that you and I have seen for a long time now, but from World War I to the current time, and their culpability is so clear because they can't even disclose the names of the people that were involved in developing this system. So what we have here, Mr. President, is absolute proof that the Five Eyes is a subversive organization that was hijacked by the banking community of the world, and they selected which corporations were going to win, which were going to lose. And these are the same people that basically exploited the German patents, which Roosevelt, by the way, agreed to, and then brought them all to the U.S. to continue exploiting all the inventions of human creativity our entire lifetime. It's now time to put an end to this.
You're so right, and it's a weaponization of our greatest intellectual property, our patents, our inventions, the things that should have placed us as the Great Britain. No, we're Great America. And we need to sever ourselves from this kind of nonsense, because what you just described with Sir Stuart Menzies and Sir Edward Travis basically has been replicated here in America, and Marshall and the Highlands Forum and Intel,
and James B. Chandler and the IBM Eclipse Foundation. They've handed all of this technology to Silicon Valley to develop these monopolies that are now attempting to completely censor and silence the American Republic so that they can continue reaping the benefits of this very devious, very devilish agreement that these guys sat around and created at the end of World War II, and that we are the victims of our entire lives. So we've got to realize that the propaganda that these guys promoted into our mainstream media, I should say public relations, our mainstream media throughout the world were nothing but their lying propaganda arms, whereby they supported this monopoly on the development of communications throughout the world. And I mean, it's just astounding that it could be this bad. Astounding.
Reuters is basically just their propaganda unit, and then it
Oh,
became the
these
Associated
guys had
Press.
stock in Reuters. These guys created Reuters.
Absolutely.
These guys.
And then they keep it through the politicalization of their groups. Like, I would say that Andrew Marshall and Henry Kissinger's Council on Foreign Relations, which is a break off of the Cecil Rhodes Roundtable, Milner Roundtable, the British Institute for International Affairs,
Right.
the Chatham
And the
House,
Atlantic Council.
the Atlantic Council, the Pilgrim Society, all of these
Bilderberg Group.
They're propaganda groups. And what do they support? Military. And what does the military support? Stealing every patent they can weaponize, or any patent that's
Right.
going to bring tons of money. So what we're really dealing with here is the American model was based upon the British model, and it's based upon militarization. It's based upon basically in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, everything is focused on only one thing, and it has nothing to do with the people. It's preserving the monarchy, period.
Power.
And
Right.
we have demonstrated that the power of the monarchy is beyond anything anyone has ever been able to clearly point out with the golden shares. With
People need to realize that the reason there's such good feelings about the monarchy to this day has been propaganda.
Exactly.
Been a very you've had ultimate money to push a propaganda that makes the Queen sound very motherly, and anytime that anyone touches that idea, they get buried in the counter propaganda.
Yes, look at the propaganda.
And what we're seeing now is the complete shut off of the conservative voice in the U.S. by these same people, because they know, they read your mail. They know what you're saying to other people. They know how to basically manipulate the mechanisms of digital control now, where we're getting into the digital keys, we're getting into the public key infrastructure. We're now looking at the very real possibility that their hijack of ICANN is going to actually shut off websites when they get too pesky. We're very close to a completely totalitarian future
The squelching of
if we don't
free
stop it
speech
now.
in America is going the way of Britain and the European Union and China and Russia and Turkey and North Korea and Iran. Let's remember that all of those fascist countries have already taken control of the internet. They can control it now. It's happening here in America. Well, who is controlling it? If you look at that, we have spelled that out in great detail, but let's just look at what the Telegraph did. The news agency that came out with these two reports, basically giving Alexander Downer the excuse to say he's a warrior for the Western Alliance, and the excuse,
they're just running cover.
And the excuse that they're going to cover sources and methods, and that's going to be the reason why they can't reveal that the British were deeper behind all of this. But in the Telegraph articles, it basically pointed out the big thing they wanted to convince people is that Theresa May was never told. Why?
Yeah, what a joke.
That means the Queen doesn't know. Remember, this is the lie they have to tell on every single issue.
The Telegraph is a propaganda arm of Five Eyes. Nothing short of that. We've got to remember, these are public relations agencies. They're not investigators. They're not journalists. And they are going to lay down a story that they can get the public to believe, because most people don't have the time to dig into all this stuff. Well, our people have, and we've got their number now.
Well, the biggest propagandist maybe on the earth would be Lord Malik Brown. The biggest controller of the military-industrial complex on the face of the earth would be, oh, by the way, is he a Sir or Baron Malik Brown? I can't ever remember.
He is a Lord. He's a Lord. Lord Mark Malik Brown.
He's a Lord. And then we have...
He's not a Sir.
Yeah, okay. Then we have Sir Geoffrey Patty. Then we have Sir Richard Dearlove. And then we have Sir Charles Furr. And then we have the Sir Stuart Menzies. And then we have Sir. They're Sirs because they serve the Queen, and they're probably on her Privy Council And here in America, Hillary is the queen. She was to become the queen, and her whole thing was to be just like the monarchy of Great Britain. She would have been the queen of Great America, but it would have been all of the Americas. That was the plan. That's what NAFTA was supposed to do, is end Mexico and Canada, roll them all together, and we would become part of the Commonwealth of the Brits. That's what the plan was. So when they try to say Theresa May didn't know, even though Sir Charles Farr knew, everyone knew, but nobody told Theresa May. Same nonsense that Bruce Orr tried to float, saying he was the back channel for Christopher Steele once he was fired from the FBI for releasing all the information, which the BP dossier was never supposed to be released. That was McCain getting too excited. I love just pointing that out because we're the only people. But anyway, the point is that they're protecting Theresa May because she's the connection to the Queen, and if out that the Queen was doing this, that would be the end of the monarchy. Why would there be a monarchy?
Certainly her subjects are doing it, and these all these sirs are not sir for no reason. They're there to keep the power structure in play. That's their job. They don't care about America. Never did.
And don't forget that they sent over the deputy is he a sir, a lord, a baron? What's his
Sir Nick Clegg, yeah.
Sir Nick Clegg.
He's a knight.
And they also sent over a little
Lord. He's a baron.
He's a baron. Okay, so you can't get more royalty stuffed into America at this point. And what are they doing here? Supporting Facebook? Facebook just took down free speech in the European Union. And you can go to jail for saying you think that you don't like Muslims. But the Muslims don't go to jail if they stabbed you with a knife or kill you or rape your daughter.
Or say they're going to take over America on C-SPAN.
Promise that they're going to take over
today.
Britain, America, Union, and kill all Americans. I mean, do people not understand that these fascist chants are really speaking the truth? These are religious prayers when they say they're going to kill all Americans. That is a religious jihad prayer that they need to live up to. So if you think for a minute that Britain is Britain anymore, you are mistaken. George Soros took over Britain. What's going on right now is Theresa Soros is patsy, just like Angela Merkel. But because Theresa May never had a plan for Brexit, as she had to admit, because she was certain George Soros was going to get a second Brexit vote and win it, just like he tried to get a second American vote for the president to try basically delegitimize the election of President Trump. He did the same thing with Brexit, as you know. Theresa May says, well, let's have one more big vote. And she never had a plan. She did nothing more than sit around and wait to hear what George Soros is going to tell her. So Theresa May has to be considered innocent in relationship to the coup d'etat, the overthrow of the American president and the overthrow of the U.S. Constitution, using her British patsies and the lookalikes, the senior executive service. But let me just make this perfectly clear. It is impossible, 100% impossible for me to believe that the Queen and her son and her husband and the rest of the members of the Privy Council aren't 100% aware of this conspiracy and were principal players, if not the initial creators of the plan. Especially they were the major actors.
There was way too much energy and attention given to this for that not to be exactly. And you know, one of the things that really pointed us to the fact that this Five Eyes argument was going to be coming up was in Tricia B. Anderson's interview to the Joint Judiciary Oversight Committee, which you've talked about a number of times, but she was James Baker's assistant deputy attorney general deputy general counsel for the FBI. There's a very strange page on page 92 of her testimony. The whole page is where a Democratic lawyer is asking her about Five Eyes and to define what it is and how it's a special information sharing relationship. And then it goes on for a page and is it supposed to be for political purposes? And of course the answer is no. And then boom, that's it. One page about the Five Eyes, nothing before it, nothing after it. None of the Republicans followed up on it. None of the Democrats followed up on it. So you got to ask yourself, what was that in there for? And given this Telegraph article that you point out, it's very clear they are going to invoke the Five Eyes secrecy agreement to try to, as the excuse for not disclosing who these Brits were that tried to bring down our president. And so our people started looking at, okay, tell us more about this Five Eyes. So they started digging into the historical documents, and voila, there it is. They are going to claim that the sources and methods of Five Eyes can't be revealed to the American public. And I say this is, I won't tell you what I think it is. It's a certain kind of excrement. And
I thought you were going to give me a legal term, but that's probably the better and more accurate term. Yes,
no,
dung,
it doesn't
manure.
deserve a legal term.
Oh yes, there's many names
yes.
for what's going on in DC.
And I think that the Attorney General Barr and the President are well within their rights to completely ignore that idea of sources and methods, because what we have just proven is the entire Five Eyes alliance is a fraud. Is a fraud that's been pushed on the entire world, including our country, and including citizens of Britain. And it is nothing more than an excuse for criminal elements to organize a racketeering effort these last 80 years against the entire world. And they need to be outed now. Named now. Because anybody that was underneath this, that was actually engaged in this secrecy and this secrecy agreement, had to know that this was totally corrupt from this fish rotted from the head. Had to know. And so therefore they're not innocent bystanders in this. We need to know who these people are so we can get on with raising the consciousness of the world, because it has been run by criminal, corrupt spies who had only one thing in mind: power and money, and taking care of their people. That's all it is. You talk about organized crime. The Italian crime families don't hold a candle for these people. They have used our government and our goodwill throughout the world to enrich themselves and their friends. Full stop. I'm just disgusted.
Yeah, it is disgusting. And it's become standard operating procedure. It's become so institutionalized that everybody was getting their piece of the unlawful pie. It's become that the British offshore accounts have become basically the way to grease the political machine of America. And we are seeing now that those people who are part of those processes are crumbling. And the reason is simply because we have
deservedly so. It's about time.
Yes, and because lawfulness has come back, the rule of law has come back. You know, we get to see so many, 60 people jump off of Capitol Hill because Trump got elected because they didn't want to go down.
Well, they've got all the judges. They've got all the judges in their pockets, so they're going to try to preserve this thing. The fight is on.
Oh, they're
going to try to preserve their power.
Yes, sir. And just as you pointed out, they're going to try to say it's all legal. And they will say it's all legal. And you'll have Trish Anderson say, well, I signed off of all four of the FISAs, but I didn't read them. We have Rat Rodenstein, he literally says, I didn't read the FISAs I signed, the FISA application. They said that under testimony.
Oh, I see. The agreement that's going to spy on the future possible president of the United States, you didn't bother reading. That is horse you know what?
It is.
Give me a break. We're being way too reasonable as citizens of this country. We've got to get incensed by this. This is ridiculous. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm telling you that yes, you're absolutely right, and that this is treason, and Trump has called it out for what it is. And here's
Right.
what people don't want to hear, and we can finish with this. It doesn't matter whether you're an American thinking that you're a Brit like Stephen Halper, the walrus, because he has dual citizenship. It doesn't matter that you're Arvinder Sambai, who is the FBI representative of the Crown prosecutors to the special counsel and also as the ombudsman for basically rogue CIA, rogue FBI activity. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what agency you're in America. It doesn't matter whether you're in the State Department, the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA.
Right.
The
All of
NSA.
these rules are the fruit of a poisonous tree. They're all fraudulent.
As if
They
you-
can't rely on those. They can't hide behind those anymore. We found you, folks.
Yes, and sorry, folks, we warned you of this. You better become a white hat because there's no such thing as a gray hat. We warned you of this 2 years ago. You're going to be a black hat, and you're going to be charged with treason because guess what? In America, if you know someone is doing a treasonous act and you don't turn them in immediately, it is your treason. You are now
Five
complicit.
Eyes is the fruit of a poisonous tree that's 80 years old.
And it's treasonous because if they're our friends, they committed treason to overthrow us. But they're not, so they're war actors. But the domestic friends that they have here, they're all treasonous. And it's been said by Brett Kavanaugh, there's 3 different ways to go after treason. 2 for citizens and 1 if you're in the military. And they ask him, has that ever happened? He says, yes, it's happened in America. And it's going to happen again, folks, because Trump is not, he doesn't say things just for jollies. And when he said
Well, no wonder they want to
he
get rid of him. This is the cash cow for every racketeer, also called an international corporation on the planet. This is their policing system. This is how they keep hidden from public view. And this very system is the system that runs our world propaganda. So they've got all their bases covered. How did this ever come out? I don't know, but it's out.
They better, like Susan Rice, like Jonathan Weiner, like James Baker, like so many of them that jump ship, they better get out there with their alibis and they better give some evidence to turn in their bosses above them because guess what? You participated in treason. You will
You're
go
out,
down.
folks. You can't be run by the British anymore.
Mm-hmm. And when they say, "Oh, there's good people in the FBI," no, there's not.
No, I don't believe so.
Not if they haven't come forward. Because if you didn't know by watching the newspaper, by watching the news, what we have been reporting, and you are a government federal agent or a member of the Department of Justice, and you didn't notice the treason, that's not going to wash. Because
ignorance of the law is no excuse. You can't operate in this system and claim innocence. You can't do it. If you didn't turn these people in, then you're a part of it.
Now, it's true that Mueller and Comey have made it so that you can keep the exculpatory evidence from a case as they did with George Papadopoulos, Michael Flynn, and others during the special counsel. But a series of actions that demonstrate sedition and traitorous, treasonous actions that will supersede any of the pathetic little, what are basically...
These guys are following the British. They're not even following our laws.
No, these are judicial regulations. Treason. They're not even laws. This is stuff that they made up to protect themselves in that
policy.
System.
And in these secret agreements, which they, by the way, in this secret agreement, the agreement itself says you can't even tell others, any third party, that the agreement exists. So that means none of us were ever told.
It's just like in Britain. Their secret committees, no one knows who's on them except the Queen. They're not allowed to ever admit anybody's on it, and no one goes to the meetings. There's no minutes taken. Same thing happened here in America with Andrew Marshall and Kissinger and their little Highlands Forum group. Same thing, secret meetings, no agendas. You can't write it down, but when you walk out, you have the
Such
insider
people are
trading
not genius.
information that will make you a billionaire. And that's, I'm
Right.
not exaggerating.
That's not investing genius. That's called fraud.
Exactly.
And that's all they've been doing. And the media went along with it, and they called them little genius investors. And we have been so hoodwinked by our entire financial press who went along with this same game. Why? Because they were all getting enriched as well. I mean, what a deal.
The Brits,
And besides that, they stole my patent. And that's
the
in the
biggest
patents of many other creative people.
one of the biggest patents ever, and they stole it like Marconi stole Tesla's wireless because they knew it could be
Yep.
used for weaponization and for
Yeah,
experimentation.
and most
on
of these
humans.
guys that organized the Five Eyes were there in World War I, benefiting from the stolen patents from Tesla, and they were watching it be implemented by the Admiralty and the Navy. And isn't it interesting that Serco today is running most of our Space Wars Navy activities in Washington?
Oh yes.
There's been a complete continuity of this rape of the world. We have got to wake up.
We truly do, and we have to realize that Five Eyes is an agreement that is indicative of the way that the Brits have been infiltrated through Serco, through taking over, managing all of our data, managing practically everything that moves in America, managing anything where there's cash flow.
Douglas, they run Serco has the contracts to run the Office of Personnel Management in the United States, for God's sake.
Which
ridiculous.
Shows
we have been so thoroughly infiltrated. It's just astounding.
And it's all because a bunch of members of the Privy Council a long time ago militarized propaganda and convinced Americans during World War I through Woodrow Wilson, when they basically took over the White House and propagandized us into joining their wars, as if, because we speak English, we need to rule the world together. And that same myth
that's just Cecil Rhodes' vision.
Yes, and it continues to this very day. And that kind of sharing that came with the Five Eyes is like an a priori assumption that anything British is good. And I'm telling you, almost everything British is bad in terms of...
Hey, I like the British. I lived over there. I love the British. This isn't the British. This is their corrupt ruling class that's doing this. Exactly. Not the British themselves.
Right. It's the great Brits. You know, it's the monarchists. It's the Queen and her Privy Council. And the subjects of the Queen have no rights, and you have no right to ask the Queen her business. And so, I'll close this out with saying the following. Yes, Theresa May was fully aware of the attempted coup against Donald Trump. The reason they make it that she isn't is so that he will meet with her and talk with her. Otherwise, why would he meet with the enemy? Now, the Queen...
he needs to be very careful when he goes over there. Oh, these people are out for blood.
Don't shake their hand. Don't drink anything. Don't sleep where they tell you to sleep. And the Queen, they say, oh, she's daft. She doesn't know anything. That's wrong. That's wrong. The Queen's Privy Council still controls the entire United Kingdom. And so what's really going on is they wish to get him over there to do him in. Because if he gets a second term, which he will, globalism ends, and the Queen's monarchy will probably end also along with it, because of this coup d'etat, which has been going on since the first American Revolution. It's never stopped for a moment. We can go through the historical manipulations of Britain, but anywhere where money flows, the British Crown has set up a toll booth, and they're getting their taxes. So if you think that we stopped paying King George taxes back when the American First Revolution happened, you're incorrect. We still pay taxes to this day. Mr. Trump, please, I know you're aware of it, please be mindful that the Five Eyes are not our friends, because they are controlled by a British monarchy, which is something of the past that needs to end. And we need to make sure that those monarchical crown tentacles that have reached into the senior executive service and the Crown agents and Serco and all the others, they need to come to an end. So please review all
And the
contracts
IBM Eclipse Foundation.
and the patent theft. Please review all corporate interaction or political interactions with the Brits and basically just cancel them. In other words, the Brits need to go bankrupt. And that's okay. Because once they go bankrupt, then maybe they can stand on their 2 feet if they can get away from George Soros. But right now, they're just simply a puppet of George Soros, who is murdering them with the invaders that he has paid to bring into Europe and into Britain. So we are not going to allow that here in America. And that's why we support Trump. And we do not support the Five Eyes. Well, Betsy, I'm a little bit worked up. First off, I want to talk about dumb as rock Rex Tillerson, who snuck in to give his testimony, secret testimony, basically against the entire concept of oversight of the Congress. And remember, Rex Tillerson and Trump never agreed on anything, ever. He was the worst Secretary of State ever. He thought he was in charge of the state, not the secretary to the president.
Well, he's a globalist. Why in the world did anybody recommend that he get on the team?
Because Trump needed to suck his brain dry of the way that globalists run the world. Remember, the company that he ran was like this, had like the 17th largest GDP. I mean, it was like larger than nations. Okay, so he was a nation. Exxon is a nation. He needed that. So Rex Tillerson, you're a jerk, and your testimony meant nothing. And notice that nothing came out of your testimony because you have nothing to say because Trump never trusted you, and that's the reason you were fired, because you're dumb as a rock. And you were a liar when you made all those remarks about Trump. Look, he's successful. You're not. You're just thrown to the side. You're been kicked to the curb, okay? And why? Because you are a pathetic attempt at being a Secretary of State. Now,
But did you hear Nancy Pelosi's speech just recently? Talk about people who are off their rocker.
well, we've said this from the beginning. Nancy Pelosi is insane. Her drugs do not do their job. Announcing yesterday before she met with Trump to meet on infrastructure to say that he is running a cover-up is insane. Now, the reason she said that is because of what we're going to talk about today. The Telegraph. We told you the Telegraph is nothing more than a yellow journalism propaganda rag used by the British monarchy and the British government to cover themselves. It's the story they want you to believe. And they believe once they print it, that basically because they have no free speech there, no one can contest it, so therefore it might as well just be law. But it's not law, because recently, as we told you, all of the criminals are coming out with their alibis. Now the entire British Spygate group, which is more extensive than anyone knew, except for Judicial Watch, and we've already pointed this out, they were working, of course, against Trump, and they were helping lead the attack.
Lead is a very important word here, because some reporters would like you to think that Obama asked the English for assistance, and that's not the way it is.
Now, we now know from the Telegraph report, 2 articles that the Telegraph in Britain printed. It's their alibi. Well, they state things in there that we had already told you, which we had proof of, which then they are now basically trying to cover their trail. You want to talk about a cover-up, Pelosi? The cover-up is the British cover-up. And now we have Devin Nunes writing a letter to the president saying, when you meet with Theresa May, and the Telegraph article says Theresa May was never informed of all of this conspiracy against Trump and the the Steele dossier, which was basically handled by everyone in the British intelligence community. They all had it, but now they're trying to say they only had it after the election to try to cover their
Are
trail.
you kidding? It is the British that ran the whole overthrow of Donald Trump. That's it, bottom line. And their lies and their propaganda will not cover up the truth.
Now we know that we have the proof all the way back to January of 2016 that McCain was involved with Andrew Wood and was involved with Christopher Steele and was involved with everyone. I'm going to explain here in a minute the way that it really falls out, which is basically exactly the way we told you it falls out. The first involvement of Five Eyes and British spying on us was done, as we told you, in April of 2015. Why do we know that? Because we were told the cockamamie stories that the FBI came to the DNC in April of 2015 and said, hey, we think your server has been compromised. That wasn't the FBI. The article in the Telegraph says it was the Brits. Yes. Now, here's what's really strange, and this is where you have to read between the lines. The Brits in their article in the Telegraph say that they came and they noticed that there was some chatter back and forth between the Trump campaign and Russians. Okay, hold the horses. There was no Trump campaign. There was no interaction between Russia and Trump campaign in 2015 in April. That's a lie. That was the FBI's covering the FBI story that the FBI came to the DNC and said, you've been hacked by Russia. In April of 2015, we know this. Comey said it over. It was said repeatedly by Comey and others. And then the DNC said, no, we're not going to let you look at our server. Okay, that is when the British noticed the interaction of the Hillary Clinton emails, the server and the DNC server and Podesta, they were all being hacked. Who were they being hacked by? Not Russians. It was being internally hacked by Imran Alron. This is a fact. All the DNC, excuse me, all of the IT people on the Hill for the House, for the Democratic House members, have all testified to this, that Imran Alwan had already set up this subterfuge, this espionage. It was going on. They knew this. Did Hillary care? No, because she knew that the Chinese were getting a copy. Everybody was getting a copy except the Russians, the Pakistanis, the Israelis. Everybody had a copy, okay?
And the American people.
Yeah, the American people didn't get it, and we still don't have it. Because why? Christopher Wray has copies of all of it, but he won't give it up. Now, this was the lie told in the Telegraph that said, oh, we, as Five Eyes, were pulled in because of Russian connections to Trump in April of 2015. Oh, my gosh. This is the preparation for the redaction of the FISA court warrant justification material, which is going to show that the Brits were deeply involved. The Brits were beyond deeply involved, okay? Now I'm going to tell you what has come out, which we already knew because Judicial Watch's FOIA request got these notes.
Listen, they were using their friendship. The Brits were using our supposed friendship to overthrow the election that Americans went to the polls and voted for President Trump. And you have the Brits over there trying to overthrow this result and topple our government. These are not our friends. They are our enemy.
And they say Theresa May was never informed, though
Baloney.
Sir Charles Farr, who was the head of the Joint Intelligence Committee, Andrew Parker, the head of the MI5, Alex Younger, the head of MI6, all knew about it. But now they say they didn't know about it until after the election. Lie. We know when they knew about it. They knew about it in April of 2015 when this whole thing started. And they were already meeting with Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele had meeting after meeting with the head person for intelligence in Britain. They went over every single sentence of the 16 installments to the Trump-Russia dossier, which was all lies. And any intelligence person that would believe a single word of it is an idiot. So they didn't go over it. Christopher Steele didn't go to Sir Charles Farr to say, hey, what do you think of this? He knew where it came from. Christopher Steele knew where it came from. It came from Cody Shear. It came from Blumenthal. It came from Comey. It came from McCabe. It came from Perkins Coie. It came from Glenn Simpson. It came from Nellie Orr. It came from Bruce Orr. It came from the FBI. It came from everybody.
But yet Nancy Pelosi says President Trump is having a cover-up.
The cover-up is going on in Britain, and Pelosi's trying to help it.
Yes.
Now, when Christopher Steele met with Sir Charles Farr, he should have been fired if he believed that that was a real document. So what do we have? Can we surmise from that? He helped write it. He helped create it. And he was the person that Sir Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of MI6, who's retired, when he met with Christopher Steele was told by Sir Dearlove, go and give it to this person who will take it to the Americans. That person was Sir Charles Farr. But now this isn't good enough, because also the British ambassador to the Russians, Andrew Wood, was involved in this. The Australian High Commissioner to Britain, Alexander Downer, was right there. Put them all in one room. They might as well be all in one room with, as you're going to point out,
what?
Ms. Haspel.
Oh, Gina Haspel.
She had to have been there.
She's in the London CIA office running this. Of course she knows this has gone down. In fact, she's complicit with this.
And the idea that Theresa May didn't know is stupid and insane.
And I want to know, has Gina Haspel given a full report to the president about the British overthrow of his presidency?
And because we know that Robert Hannigan was also involved directly, and he met, literally we know the date that he met, and who did he meet with? He didn't meet with his counterpart, which would have been Admiral Rogers. He met with John Brennan, the traitor, who helped set up all of this based upon no evidence, no intelligence.
Well,
and
they
we
don't
went
need
over that
that.
yesterday.
If you're running an overthrow of another government, you're just going to do what you have to do.
Now, here's the big deal. During Obama's administration, he sent Kathleen Kavalek, who is a deputy assistant to the U.S. State Department, who directly worked for Victoria Nuland, who was one of the sources of the nonsense that there was a call from Estonia saying that Russia had compromised material on Trump. That's it. Was the lie of Victoria Nuland, who was the head of the Europe and Eurasian, and her assistant Kathleen Kavalek, met with Christopher Steele in London after he met with Sir Charles Farr, after he met with Sir Richard Dearlove, after he met with Arvinder Sambhai, after he met with Alison Saunders. It is impossible to imagine that Theresa May did not know this, and it is impossible to imagine that the Privy Council members, Lord Malloch Brown, Patty, and the rest of them, they had to have known. There could not have been an intelligence action against another country to unseat an basically to destroy an election, to destroy a president-elect, and to unseat a duly elected president without it going to Theresa May and directly to the Queen.
And why every American should be royally PO'd is think about all the wars that we have gone over there to support the British in their fight for freedom, and they turn around and do this to us? I'm telling you, we need some economic sanctions on these oligarchs and Privy Council people. What are we going to do about this?
Well, one thing's for sure. Victoria Nuland did not send Kathleen Kavalek to meet with Christopher Steele without Obama knowing. And remember, John McCain knew from the beginning. John McCain knew in December of 2015, if not all the way back to April of 2015, when the British got involved. And the British got involved to do what? Cover up to create lies. And you want to talk about a cover-up. This cover-up goes back to April of 2015, when the British were working with John McCain, working with Obama, working with Victoria Nuland, working with Comey and his 28 crimes of treason, which all led up to this. This was a long thought-out plan thing. This was the last thing that was done was in July of 2016, when John Brennan opened an official investigation of an operation, counterintelligence operation called Crossfire Hurricane, based upon framing George Papadopoulos with the help of the Brits. But that was late. early on, the Brits were involved from the beginning, from the moment that they knew Hillary's weaknesses, and the weakness was her connection to Russia, and Mueller's connection to Russia, Andrew McCabe's connection to Russia, Podesta's connection to Russia, illegal connections. Okay, that is what they were trying to cover up. The uranium one was the tip of the iceberg. There was much more than that. The uranium 145 million payoff was the tip of the iceberg. There's much more. We've told you all about it. So what was really going on? Don't forget, Comey had Franklin Foer set up through Slate Magazine, the October surprise of the money being shifted to, supposedly, from Trump Towers to Alpha Bank in Russia. This is what they're going to try to hang the whole thing on, because the Telegraph article tells us basically a warning of the lies they're going to use to try to do the cover-up when the redactions come. They're going to try to say that the Brits accidentally ran across, and this is beautiful because it was Comey who paid Franklin Foer, and we know this because he was one of the people paid by the FBI. This is well known, but they're going to say it was the Brits who did this, that the Brits found that Trump was being paid by the Russians from April 2015. Those are all lies. But they're going to try to weave it all together, mesh it all together, and try to say it's all the Brits. And then they're going to try to cover up saying, we can't tell you the whole truth because of sources and methods. Sources being the British intelligence agencies, all the way to the top. That's what they're going to try to do, folks. So the fantastic lies that are coming out right now, that's why Devin Nunes wrote his letter to the president saying, when you see Theresa May, would you please ask these questions? Because the questions will reveal everything we're telling you, that the British were involved from the beginning. It was their Spygate, Five Eyes conspiracy, but it was working with all of our people. It
was an attack on the United States by Great Britain. And the reason I keep pointing to the Queen is because she's the head of this thing. And we need to point to her, make it personal. That old lizard lady and her privy council put out a plan to take down our president. And patriots, we cannot stand for that. We must cut ties with Britain. And this will help the British patriots too, because they are in the same struggle with this evil monarch.
Now, how do we know these things? Because Judicial Watch did FOIA requests, and those FOIA requests show that Kathleen Kavalek was talking with Bruce Orr, targeting Trump, saying, how can we target him for Russian associations? She was the person connected with Russia, Kathleen was. Orr is the criminal person connected with international criminality. They were trying to set up Trump early on, and we have their communications back and forth showing that they trying to link him to Russia. So they tried to link him to Russia to Alpha Bank. They tried to link him to Russia through Rob Goldstein. They tried to link him to Russia through Joseph Mifsud, whose name is really Joseph de Gabriel. They tried to link him through Felix Sater, who is certainly a Russian. They tried to link him to the Russian Henry Greensburg. Brennan tried all of these things. None of them worked. Then he tried the PP video. He paid Sergei Millian to go and find it. He paid everybody. Standard, $100,000. Go find me the PP video. He paid every Russian that John McCain could come up with. And remember, John McCain is a communist and a Russian, and he was being literally paid through his foundation by the Russians while he was still alive, while he was still in Congress, and especially when he was running for president.
Yeah, Meghan McCain, your daddy is a traitor and will always be a traitor to the United States.
So when Comey couldn't come up with nothing, Brennan tried to pick up the ball and run with it, took that baton, tried all these things, tried to frame up of Papadopoulos, tried to frame up of Sam Clovis, tried to frame up, of course they'd already tried, that was Comey trying to frame Carter Page. So then he tried to frame George Papadopoulos through this incredible, most amazing bungled spy routine that I've ever seen anywhere. And it was completely bungled. And when that didn't work, they started off with the nonsense that a call came in from Estonia. They came off now with the Telegraph report stating it was British Five Eye intelligence proving that Trump was connected to the Russians. In other words, we're back to square one. And that's why Pelosi's out there screaming, as she always does when they're very desperate. She goes and screams the opposite. Who's a cover-up? She's the cover-up. She received the intelligence briefings on all of these things. She was complicit in the whole thing.
Well, who sat on that committee along with Devin Nunes? All of them knew.
Oh, absolutely. And all of the Senate Intelligence Committee knew. And anyone connected with John McCain, because he was blasting it everywhere, knew. And anybody connected to British intelligence knew. The entire British intelligence community knew. Our intelligence community knew. That's the reason Admiral Rogers jumped ship, because he saw what was going on. He had to get out of there.
So, Thomas, everybody now knows that the Brits were doing this to take down the president. So what can be done? We need to start arresting these people.
We need to go to the 7th floor of the State Department, where Hillary weaponized it for her, and she weaponized it for the election. Jonathan Weiner has come out and stated all of these things. Jonathan Weiner has spilt the beans, stating her real theft, APCO theft, $20 billion worth of theft and fraud through the Clinton Foundation. So Jonathan Weiner has come out and said this. Now Kathleen Kavalek, sorry, we have your very words. Bruce Orr, you have a big mouth, so does your wife, Nellie. And so we have caught you in all of this, but it was the 7th floor of the State Department where this was ran by Victoria Nuland, when they couldn't find any dirt on Trump from the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, nothing. They went to the State Department and they invented this stuff. And then Comey said, that's it. I'm doing all 28 of my treasonous crimes for all these October surprises, which they would merge with Brennan's counterintelligence operations. And that's why Comey could say he never had an investigation. It was a CIA counterintelligence operation, which is illegal to conduct against a U.S. citizen unless you have proof that they are an agent. And that's what the stupid dossier states. Please remember that all of you out there need to read this dossier. It is the most historic document in American history. It's going to be right up there with the Declaration of Independence. And when you read it, if you believe it, you're an idiot. And the first sentence says that Trump has been a Russian spy for 5 years.
Well, you would think that if he were, then they would have found something by now.
Why didn't they indict him? Why haven't they indicted him? And as you pointed out, after 8 investigations, literally hundreds of millions of dollars, and I can name all of them, nothing was found. They aren't even able to invent anything from a grand jury attempt to indict a president with no crime for a special counsel that was started with no crime. There never was a crime, and there's not going to be any crime. The only crimes are all the crimes of the Democrats. So the 7th floor State Department of Hillary Clinton was weaponized, and that's what's going on. And now what do you see? You see the Brits doing their fancy dance.
Well, wait a minute before you go there, because people go, well, how does that relate? Well, remember, you've got the Senior Executive Service, and this is the operation that's embedded in our government bureaucracy that does the will of the Crown. And they were just carrying out orders that come to them from the Crown.
Absolutely. Arvinder Sambhai is the handler of the FBI.
Yes.
And the DOJ handler is Allison Saunders.
These are all Brits, folks. And if your news people are not talking about Senior Executive Service and about these details and screaming about Allison Saunders and Arvinder Sambhai, you need to ask yourself why.
Allison Saunders, we have proof because the dinner with Orr's and Nellie and Bruce Orr's messages, back and forth text messages. Allison Saunders, the head Crown prosecutor for the Queen, for Theresa May, okay, for the intelligence community, nobody higher than her, was running the back channel operation through Bruce Orr, who had already still passing on Christopher Steele information. Okay, after Christopher Steele was fired by the FBI. Remember, Christopher Steele was paid by the FBI. Stephen Halper was paid by the FBI. Okay, these are our agents. Carter Page was paid by the FBI. Felix Sater was paid. Sergei Emelian. All the criminals I'm telling you were on the payroll, because that's how corrupt our intelligence agencies had become. And the State Department was leading it because Hillary had already weaponized it. Jonathan Weiner jumped ship early. Why? And when he jumped ship, he told the truth. Why did he jump ship? Because he was 100% guilty. He is the one who actually set up the meeting for Kathleen Kavalek to go meet Christopher Steele along with Sir Charles Farr, along with the rest of them that we've mentioned, the Brit spies, the Brit enemies that were attacking us. And remember, the other one, Alexander Downer, another Five Eyes Brit, what he called warrior for the Western Alliance. No, warrior for the Hillary Alliance, or a warrior for the Queen. That's who Alexander Downer was. Stole $25 million from the Australian government, gave it to the Hillary Clinton Foundation for AIDS, drugs, and didn't get any. And that was one of two, and that was the smaller of the payments. People aren't talking about the fact that he's actually gave $70-80 million in just a few years when he was the basically the head of Australia. And so then he is the person who then comes out and gives his alibi just the other day, was it yesterday or the day before, saying, George Papadopoulos kept asking me about those emails. I didn't have anything to do with this. Wrong. He sent his assistant, liar, not his assistant, a counterintelligence operative, to seduce George Papadopoulos, to get him to come to a meeting with Alexander Downer at a bar. At a bar. Alexander Downer, the High Commissioner in England for Australia, sends a counterintelligence spy woman. I should use derogatory terms, but he, don't forget there were 4 of those women sent after George Papadopoulos, and they were all successful. And then George goes to a meeting at a bar where Alexander Downer keeps sticking his phone in his face saying, don't you have the connection to the Russian Hillary dirt? And George never once said yes, because he didn't even know what he was talking about.
Listen, I was going through putting together the CAT report, and I found this Twitter from a person who says, this is wild, but over here in my restaurant, James Clapper had dinner with this woman. Who is this person? This would be very important for the United States to know. And the picture was with Arvinder Sambai.
No.
Yes, I've got it up there because I want people to tweet back to the Twitter person and let them know we know who that is. It's Arvinder Sambai.
That's the picture Nunes is talking about.
Well, we want to know more details about it. The picture didn't have Clapper and Sambai in it.
Oh.
It was his eyewitness testimony that in this particular pub, restaurant, whatever it is, that Clapper and Sambai were together, and he gives the dates and everything. I'll put that in the description box, okay?
That's beautiful, because
Yes.
we have pictures of Mifsud with all Western intelligence. Mifsud, who is on the, I would bet a nickel, he's on the payroll of the British intelligence, because just follow the fact, who was he taking orders from? Arvinder Sambai.
Of course.
Who gave orders to George Papadopoulos. She gave orders to Gina Haspel to give orders to Matt Gaeta in London, who was also giving orders to Alison Saunders, Stephen Halper, and the whole gang.
So
Arvinder Sambai was the key. She's the linchpin.
And we're not sure, he, she, whatever it is, works for the Queen.
Has to, because she used to be a Crown prosecutor also.
Yes, of course.
And she's in all these private intelligence agencies, which are just made up groups. And who's in them? Alexander Downer, Christopher Steele, Dearly, all of them.
But you know
all of
what's
them are
so
in
exciting is Trump is getting ready to go over to visit the Queen. And then afterwards, he's going to have tea with Melania and Camilla and Charles. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall for these conversations?
it. Don't shake hands with any of them. Don't drink anything they give you, and do not sleep where they tell you to sleep, Mr. President and Melania. They are trying to kill you.
Yes.
They tried to kill you last time.
They have no other out. They have to get rid of Donald Trump.
Remember, Mr. President, the man who was in the little helicopter who flew right over your head and could have dropped a bomb
It
on
wasn't
you.
a helicopter.
It was a little
glider.
a glider thing.
Parachute
It's like
thing.
a little helicopter. So the deal is, the Brits didn't stop that, but they witnessed it. So you were not protected by the British. How many times was your group, your caravan, interrupted and had to change directions? How many times did they disturb your schedule? Everything on your schedule was rearranged, Mr. President, to try to throw you into chaos. And that's the reason that, I don't know if you remember this, there were the crazy people during the explosions. Remember when you and the Queen went, they were blowing stuff up for you to show how powerful the Queen is? There were people who tried to get you then. And I'm glad you changed where you said you were going to sleep. I don't know if you were taking our advice. Do not sleep where they tell you to sleep. Do not drink anything,
whistles.
and do not shake hands with any
Stock
of them. Tell them
market
you
will
have
be
a cold.
going down.
Do not shake hands with any of them. Polonium, uranium, all the things they kill people with in London, their whole thing is to assassinate people and blame it on the Russians and everyone catches them later, and nothing ever happens. No Brit ever goes to jail for the crimes of killing people, assassinating people, and blaming it on Russians. And why is it always that it's the compromised people who were part of spying who are murdered?
Okay. Anything else as we wrap this up?
Please be careful, Mr. President, because Theresa May, her days are over, and you don't remember. Boris Johnson was seen with his arm around George Papadopoulos. Please remember that David Cameron had private meetings with George Papadopoulos. Let's remember the entire British uh, power structure set up George Papadopoulos. Remember that they had articles every day in the Telegraph when George Papadopoulos was living in London, making him to be the greatest foreign advisor for Trump that there ever was, and that George Papadopoulos was going to be controlling Trump's foreign policy. Remember that it was George Papadopoulos who got Cameron and Boris Johnson to apologize for cussing out Trump in public. Okay? They literally backed off of Trump upon George Papadopoulos asking them to. That's how much they had vested in this horrible, horrible conspiracy to overthrow the United States government, because they wanted Hillary in, because Hillary was simply going to kowtow to the Queen, as she has always done, because she wants to be just like the Queen, and she wants to be the monarch of America. So it was all set up. We were going to lose our constitutional rights. And the first American Revolution, which was never won, was going to be won by the Brits. But we are in the second American Revolution, being led by George Washington Donald Trump. And he is basically winning on all fronts. And so, Mr. President, please listen to Devin Nunes. Don't even meet with Theresa May until she answers those questions. Otherwise, she's attempting. Right.
She's going to resign, and not because of Brexit, because she doesn't want to have to face these questions about how the Brits try to overthrow our president.
If the Brits can't answer Devin Nunes' question, Mr. President, do not go to Britain, because they have only one intent, and that is to kill you. I'm sorry to have to say it, but it's just the British way, using what they've learned from the Vatican and the Jesuits. And the Jesuits always poison their people. Just look at the popes in our lives. Just look at the Pope that was murdered by the Jesuits and the way the Jesuits have manipulated things. So please, please, Mr. President, anything that they have scheduled for you that gets changed, assume it is an assassination attempt.
Don't go. Just tell the old lizard lady she can come over and visit him at his house.
If you can't answer the questions, you ain't going, and you're certainly not going to have tea with Charles, who is the biggest pedophile and one of the most evil people on the face of the earth. Why would you have tea with him? He is the number one globalist, right there with Tony Blair, in the whole world. You are destroying globalism. You are destroying the monarchy. The monarchy, by the end of your second term, will be gone in Britain. There will be no monarchy. That is a prediction that I'm making, and I will put a nickel on that one. Because why? Spygate, British Spygate, is going to take them down.
Wow, look at that. I think the sun's coming out. Like the sun's coming out. Boy, listen to those frogs. No trains, though. No choo-choo trains. Stock market's going down. Stock market will come back up when the trains come back. Count on it. Yeah, there's a couple more storms out there. They'll be back all week. All week, Lucky. Be shipping this water down to T-Town, Tulsa, Oklahoma. But they got the means to process it. Run that shit into the Mississippi River. Going outside, Jenkins. All right. Jenkins food bowl is now Jenkins water bowl. Okay. Time for me to go. Look for another video. Watch. It's England. The war with England is never over. It just does never end. Look, the sun is coming up. Peace. Just out.